Alright, so this Saturday, October 28th, we have UFC Fight Night 119, Sao Paulo, Derek Brunson versus Lyoto Machida. It's about time for me to give you guys my predictions for the main card. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, the first fight on the main card, we have a bantamweight bout between Marlon Vera and John Hands of Stone Lineker. Now, Lineker is a guy that possesses so much power in his hands. I mean, he has incredible knockout power. He has good boxing skills. 13 of his wins come by knockout. He currently has a record of 29-8. Always comes in excellent shape. He has excellent cardio, and he's extremely aggressive. He likes to attack to the body. He likes to throw punches to the body. He likes to mix it up with combinations. And he is as tough as they come. He's extremely tough. He's extremely durable. He has a good chin, and that is clearly evident when you look at the fact that he has never been knocked out throughout the entirety of his career. But he's short. He's really small. Especially even for the bantamweight division, he's small. He only stands at about 5'3" tall. He is one of the better bantamweights in the UFC. He's currently ranked number 5. Now he's going up against Marlon Vera. Marlon Vera is not ranked as of right now, but he's coming off a couple of good wins. I mean, he has that submission win over Brian Kelleher and also the TKO victory over Brad Pickett. So he definitely has some nice wins under his belt, but he's still very inexperienced. He's still a very young fighter. He has tons of potential though, inexperienced, especially when you compare him to the likes of John Lineker, who has stepped inside of the octagon with some of the better bantamweights in the world. Now Marlon Vera is a big bantamweight. He's a complete opposite of John Lineker. He's about 5'8", which is big for the bantamweight division. He's long. He's clearly going to have the reach advantage in this fight. He's a strong grappler. He's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He has good boxing skills. He knows how to utilize his length, especially when he fought against a smaller fighter like Brian Kelleher. So, I mean, Vera is really going to have the tools to be able to win a fight like this, even though he is the underdog in this fight because he's going up against an established bantamweight in John Lineker. I think in this fight, Marlon Vera is gonna have to utilize his grappling. He's gonna have the advantage in the grappling and in the ground game as well because he is the longer fighter. I think his jiu-jitsu is better than John Lineker's. So I think he has to do a good job of picking John Lineker apart and obviously not getting tagged, especially early on, because like I said, John Lineker comes out from the moment the fight starts to the moment it ends. He comes out swinging, and he swings with power. So I mean, Marlon Vera is gonna have to avoid the big shots of John Lineker if he wants to have an opportunity to win this fight, because this is a big fight and this is a huge step up in competition for Marlon Vera. But he's very game. He's very tough, and I think Marlon Vera is gonna make this an interesting fight. I do not think that John Lineker is just gonna come in and steamroll over him. You know, I don't think he's just gonna walk through Marlon Vera. And I really want to pick Vera. I like him a lot. I do like him as a fighter. I like his fighting style. I think he has tons of potential to become a contender in that division. But I mean, like I said earlier, this is a huge step up in competition now. Like I said, if Marlon Vera wants to be able to win this fight, he's gonna have to grapple with him. He's gonna have to grind John Lineker against the cage, and he's gonna have to outbox him. He's gonna have to box him up. He can't stand there for too long and exchange punches with John Lineker. Now, John Lineker wants to win the fight. He's gonna have to come out aggressive. He's gonna have to cut off the cage, and he's gonna have to get on the inside. He's gonna have to attack the body of Marlon Vera, slow him down, and then eventually land a shot upstairs that's gonna put Marlon Vera away. Now, as for my pick, I really want to pick Marlon Vera. I do think that he is a legitimate shot to upset John Lineker because of the tools he has, because he's longer, because he's very skilled in the grappling and the jiu-jitsu aspect of mixed martial arts. But I just can't do it. I'm gonna have to go with John Lineker in this fight. I do think that he's gonna come out. He's gonna hurt him with body shots. He's gonna soften him up, and I do think he's gonna punish him for the entirety of the fight because his boxing is better, because his overall striking is better than Marlon Vera. So I'm gonna give John Lineker a unanimous decision victory. Now, next up, we have a middleweight bout between Thiago Santos, who is the current 15th ranked middleweight in the world, going up against Jack Hermansson. Now, Thiago Santos is a Muay Thai practitioner. He's actually a black belt in Muay Thai, so his Muay Thai is really good. His kicks are really strong. He really does like the left high kick. He's a really good striker on the feet, and he has tremendous power in both his hands and his legs. He currently has a record of 15-5, and 10 of his wins come by knockout. Only one of his wins come by submission, so he's not as dangerous on the ground as he is on the feet, obviously. But I mean, his jiu-jitsu is improving. He's currently a purple belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But I mean, he's just a dangerous striker, especially if he's able to keep the fight, standing. That's where he's the most dangerous. That's where he makes his money, because he's such a dangerous opponent on the feet. Now he's going up against Jack Hermansson, and Jack Hermansson's one goal is to get you on the ground and to pound the heck out of you. I mean, this guy has tremendous ground and pound, and I believe in one of his post-fight interviews, he even said that there is no other person that has a ground and pound game like he does, because he's just so dominant when he gets it to the ground. He's just landing punches, he's landing elbows, he's just dominating you and testing your will. So his ground and pound is great. But his boxing skills are pretty good. I mean, he can handle his own on the feet, especially when it comes to throwing hands. Now, obviously, Thiago Santos is going to have the advantage in this fight. So if Thiago Santos can keep the fight standing, I do see it playing out to his favor, obviously. So Thiago Santos is going to have to come out. He's going to have to soften Hermansson up with some leg kicks, maybe throwing some body kicks, and just keep him on his toes, kind of throw some feints, keep Hermansson guessing, allow him to make a mistake. Maybe he ducks under to try to catch one of the kicks to be able to take the fight to the ground, and then throw up high, and maybe you catch him with a high kick like that. So I think that Santos is going to have to keep the fight standing if he wants to win this fight. He cannot go to the ground. He cannot let Hermansson get a takedown, because if it does, the fight will be over. Mark my words, if Hermansson is able to get this fight to the ground, he's going to finish it, and he's going to finish it in dominating fashion. Now, as for how I think it's going to play out, every fight starts standing up. So obviously, as soon as the bell rings, Santos is going to have the advantage. He's going to have the first crack at being able to implement his game plan into the actual fight. So I think that Thiago Santos is going to win the first round. I think he's going to land a few leg kicks, few body kicks, and I think he might actually hurt Jack Hermansson in the first round. I think Hermansson will escape. And I think in the second round, Hermansson will come out and immediately shoot for a takedown. And I don't think that Thiago Santos will be able to stuff it. And I think that Hermansson's going to get the fight to the ground in the second round. I think he's going to drop some elbows, drop some punches, do whatever it takes to hurt Thiago Santos on the ground. And I think he's going to put him away via TKO in the second round. Now, next up, we have a lightweight bout between Jim Miller and Francisco Trinaldo. Now, I think this is going to be an interesting fight, and I do think it's going to be a slugfest. I think because that's the kind of fighter that Jim Miller is, and I think he takes pride in making fights, play out like that, turn into slugfest, turn out into wars. But Jim Miller, he's a journeyman, man. He's a journeyman. He's been around. He's extremely experienced, and he's as tough as they come. He's as tough as nails. And one way to sum up Jim Miller's career is that he beats the guys he's supposed to beat, and he loses to the guys that he's supposed to lose to. I mean, if you look at his resume, he's lost to some stiff competition. I mean, he's lost to Dustin Poirier. He's lost to Anthony Pettis. He's lost to Benson Henderson, Frankie Edgar, Nate Diaz, Michael Chiesa. So, I mean, he's lost to some of the top lightweights in the world. So, although Jim Miller is not a legitimate contender in that division, although he can't hang with the best of the best, although he's not a top-tier fighter, he can beat the second-tier guys. And as far as I'm concerned, Francisco Trinaldo is a second-tier fighter. So, I mean, Jim Miller can fight. If you look at his record, you can look at his resume, look at his losses, whatever the case may be. Look at the fact that he's on a 2-fight losing streak. It doesn't change the fact that he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He has a chin. He has a tremendous chin, and good boxing skills, and really good wrestling skills. So, I mean, he's an all-around fighter, a very well-rounded fighter, and I cannot stress it enough that he is tough. Very tough. Now, Trinaldo is a guy that likes to keep the fight standing as well. He has a really good jab, as we all saw in that fight with Kevin Lee. I mean, he was jabbing Kevin Lee up, almost the entire fight. So he's really good with his hands. He's actually a black belt in kickboxing and a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. 7 of his wins come by knockout. 5 of them come by submission. So Trinaldo is definitely a guy that knows how to put fighters away. He knows how to win fights. And most importantly, he knows how to finish them. And like Jim Miller, Trinaldo is a guy that has lost to top competition as well. He hasn't had any success against the top guys in the division. I mean, if you look at his resume, he's lost to Michael Chiesa. He's lost to Gleison Tebow, who was a really tough fighter back in his heyday. And he was, I believe, like on a 7 or 8 fight win streak, something like that, before he stepped inside the octagon with Kevin Lee. Now, Kevin Lee, he was actually winning that fight, man. Like I said, he was jabbing him up almost the entire fight because Kevin Lee doesn't have any boxing skills. He doesn't know how to box, so Trinaldo was really tearing him up, on the feet. He was stuffing a couple of takedowns, really had success in that fight, and he was on his way to coming away with a decision victory. Kevin Lee was beaten, he was broken, but then Kevin Lee landed a high kick that wobbled Trinaldo. Kevin Lee was able to then take him down and then finished him off with a submission. So that was the closest that Trinaldo has came to beating a high-level fighter. Even though Kevin Lee is still green and he's not a fighter that is in his prime, he's still a top talent. Trinaldo looked good in this fight. Now, that's the last time he stepped inside the octagon. Now, this time he's stepping in there with veteran Jim Miller. I think it's going to be an interesting fight. This fight is going to be standing a majority of the fight, I do think. And I think it's going to be a slugfest. I think it's going to be a war. But I think in this fight, it's going to come down to who's in better shape, who's going to absorb more punishment and come back stronger. Now, I think there's two ways. Well, actually, there's three ways. There's two ways that I think the fight could go down, and then there's the way that I think it is going to go down. Now, the two ways I think that it could go down is I think that Trinaldo could tag Jim Miller early on in the fight, maybe first, maybe early second. I think he can tag him and then put him away, TKO him, not completely knock him out stiff, but TKO him. Or I think Jim Miller can wrestle with him, take him to the ground, allow Trinaldo to make a mistake, and then capitalize with a submission. But I don't think it's going to go down that way. I think that this is going to be a hard-fought contest. I do think it's going to be an extremely close fight. I think it's going to go down to the judges. I think the fight is going to be left in the judges' hands, and I think that they're going to award Francisco Trinaldo the split decision victory. Next up, we have a bantamweight bout between the 13th ranked bantamweight in the world, Rob Font, going up against the 12th ranked bantamweight in the world in Pedro Munhoz. Now, I think this is going to be an exciting fight because you have two young, talented fighters, two fighters that are hungry, looking to make a statement, looking to establish themselves as contenders in this division and continue to take steps forward and quite possibly earn a title shot after a few key wins. So they're looking to carry the momentum they already have with them. Now, Rob Font in his last fight against Silva de Andrade, he looked really good, man. His movement was on point. His footwork was on point. His boxing techniques, the angles he was using, knees to the body, elbows, he was doing everything, man. And he looked really poised in that fight. He really did look sharp. Actually, I think he earned performance of the night on that fight card. So, I mean, he really did look good. He's always in good shape. His cardio is tremendous. And he's an up-and-comer in this division. He currently has a record of 14-2. His UFC record is 4-1. He's currently on a 2-fight win streak throughout the entirety of his career. 6 of his wins come by knockout. 3 of them come by submission. So he has experience in terms of being able to finish fights. In his last fight with Silva de Andrade, he hurt Silva de Andrade on the feet and then put him away with a submission. So, I mean, Rob Font knows how to get it done on the feet. His ground game is improving. He's a strong grappler as well. Now, he's going up against Pedro Munhoz. Now, Munhoz, like I said, is another guy that's trying to establish himself in this division. He's currently on a 3-fight win streak. He has a record of 14-2, just like Rob Font. 7 of his wins come by submission. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so his ground game is really good. He doesn't really possess too much power in his hands. Only 3 of his wins come by knockout. But his boxing is okay. His stand-up game is okay. But he makes his money on the ground, and I think that's where he's going to look to take this fight. Now, in terms of experience, I've said that both of these guys are up-and-comers, but the difference between Pedro Munhoz and Rob Font is that Munhoz has had a shot against some of the top bantamweights in the world. Now, early in his career, I believe his first UFC fight was against Rafael Assunção. And then back in 2015, he lost to Jimmy Rivera, who at the time was also another up-and-comer. So, I mean, he has the experience. He's definitely stepped inside the octagon with better competition than Rob Font. I think it's going to make for an interesting fight. Now, Font is going to have the advantage on the feet. His footwork is excellent. If he can move around, if he can do anything in his power to avoid grappling exchanges with Pedro Munhoz, if he can, box him up on the outside, if he can utilize his jab, if he can do everything that he was doing against Silva de Andrade, but only taking into consideration the takedown, being aware of the takedown, because I think Munhoz is going to try to get the fight to the ground and attempt to submit Rob Font, but I'm not buying it. I'm not buying into it. I think that Rob Font is a better fighter. He's riding in hot. Obviously, both these guys are on win streaks, but I think that skill-wise, Rob Font is the better fighter. I think he's more equipped to make a push in this division. I'm liking his confidence. He's extremely confident right now, and I think that he's going to come in, stuff some early takedown attempts from Pedro Munhoz. I think he's going to keep the fight standing for a majority of the fight, and I think he's just going to box him up. He's going to box him up from the outside, from the inside. He's just going to land punch after punch, and I think he's just going to punish Munhoz on the feet, and I do think that Rafa is going to come away with the unanimous decision victory. Now for the co-main event, we have an interesting one. We have an experienced UFC veteran in Damien Maia going up against a young up-and-coming talent in Colby Covington. Now Damien Maia is currently the third-ranked welterweight in the world, while Colby Covington is currently ranked number 7. Now it's an interesting fight, mostly because of their styles. Their styles are completely different. Now Damien Maia, is a former middleweight contender. He competed for the belt twice, I believe. He had 2 title shots in the middleweight division, so he's a big guy. I mean, this guy is strong. He made the move down to welterweight, and he's beaten some top guys, man. I mean, he's beaten Jorge Masvidal, even though it was a bit controversial. He was able to submit Carlos Condit. He got his crack, at Tyron Woodley in an attempt to become the welterweight champion of the world, and it didn't pan out. Woodley's just a strong wrestler. He was too strong for Damien Maia, stuffed all of his takedown attempts, and it was a snooze fest. It was a boring fight, but Damien Maia fell short to the better fighter on that night. But that doesn't change the fact that Damien Maia is the best at what he does. He is the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner in the UFC, and one of the best we have ever seen in the UFC's history. Now this guy's ground game is absolutely ridiculous. He's so good on the ground, and that's his one mission. That's what he wants to do. He can't box, he can't strike. I mean, it's good enough to kind of keep people at bay, but that's not where he makes his money. He makes his money on the ground. He wants to take you down, submit you, and exploit the fact that your ground game is not on his level, nor anywhere near his level. I mean, his jiu-jitsu is just out of this world. Now, as for Colby Covington, is on the come up. He currently has a record of 12-1. His record in the UFC is 7-1, and he's currently on a 4-fight win streak. Now, the only loss on his career record comes to Warlley Alves, and that was by submission. Alves submitted him in the first round, but he is a great established wrestler. He was a 2-time NCAA All-American. He was the Pac-10 champion when he wrestled at Oregon State. His ground game is good. A third of his wins come by submission, and a quarter of his wins come by knockout. So he doesn't really possess any power. His boxing skills are really not there. He doesn't have any real tools to use on the feet. He doesn't have power in his hands. His boxing skills aren't that good. But his wrestling is what you have to look out for. That's what Damien Maia is game planning for. That's what all of Colby Covington's opponents have game plan for, is his wrestling. He's going to want to grind you up against the cage. He's going to want to take you down and hold you down for 3 rounds. Now, he definitely has the tools to beat Damien Maia, because what good is jiu-jitsu if you can't get your opponent to the ground? Like I said, as we saw in the fight with Damien Maia against Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley was another great wrestler. Damien Maia wasn't able to get the fight to the ground because Woodley was way too strong. He stuffed every takedown. I think he broke the record for stuffed takedowns in that fight. So if Colby Covington can stuff all of Damien Maia's takedowns, or at least the majority of them, I mean, if he can limit to the takedowns being at the end of the round with not enough time to work for Damien Maia, then I think he's okay. But I mean, stuffing the early shoots, that's going to be his priority. He's going to have to defend the takedown early, and being that he's an established wrestler, he shouldn't have a problem stuffing the takedowns. Now, is he as strong as Tyron Woodley? Is he as good a wrestler as Tyron Woodley? Maybe he's a better wrestler than Tyron Woodley. But aside from all the hate, Tyron Woodley is experienced, and he's a master of his craft. He's a gym rat, and he works extremely hard at making sure that he is the best fighter that he can possibly be. Even if some of the performances that he puts on are a bit boring, Tyron Woodley is a champion, and he's a champion for a reason. Now, I don't necessarily think that it was because he was just mainly just stronger than Damien Maia that he was able to look as dominant. I think because of his techniques were on point. Now, what Colby Covington lacks is the experience, and he has not stepped inside the octagon with a jiu-jitsu practitioner as good, or as great, I should say, as Damien Maia. Now, with Damien Maia, the only thing you don't just have to be aware of the takedowns. He doesn't just shoot straight up. I mean, he'll grind you up against the cage. He'll even jump on your back and backpack you for the entirety of a round. We saw that when he stepped in there with Jorge Masvidal. He was on his back standing up for a good piece of that fight. Now, I just think that Damien Maia is going to come out. I think he's going to work early. I think he's going to get the fight against the cage. If he's smart, I think he's going to do what he did to Jorge Masvidal. He's just going to do anything and everything in his power to get the fight to the ground. It doesn't matter how ugly the takedown is. I think he's going to get it. Whether he does get the takedown or whether he jumps on his back and rides him the entire fight, doesn't matter. The point is that Damien Maia is a huge step up in competition for Colby Covington. Now, I think this is how the fight is going to play out. I think that Damien Maia is obviously going to come out, right off the bat, shoot for some takedowns. And I think the early takedowns, I think Colby Covington is going to stuff. I think he's going to be fresh. He's going to be rejuvenated. He's going to stuff the takedowns. But sooner or later, as the fight progresses, the longer the fight goes on, Damien Maia is going to get a takedown. He's going to get Colby Covington to the ground. And if there is enough time, he's going to go to work and he's going to strangle Colby Covington. That's a guarantee, and I think that's exactly how the fight is going to play out. I think that in the later rounds, I'm going to say in the third round, Damien Maia is going to get the fight to the ground. He's going to sink. He's going to take his back, and he's going to sink in a rear naked choke, and he's going to come away with a submission victory. And all Colby Covington is going to have is a learning experience. Now, last but not least, we have a middleweight bout between Lyoto Machida and Derek Brunson in the main event of this card. Now, Lyoto Machida, this is going to be his first fight back in 2 years after he was suspended, after he was caught using PEDs. So this is going to be his return. It's in Sao Paulo. It's in his home country of Brazil. So he's going to have the support of the people, the home crowd. So Derek Brunson is going into Lyoto Machida's backyard. Now, Lyoto Machida is a UFC Hall of Famer without a doubt. He's a black belt in karate. His striking, his movements are very unorthodox. He likes to fight with his hands down, and he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so he's an all-around fighter. But I mean, what I'm looking at right now is the fact that the last 2 times he fought before he was suspended was against Luke Rockhold, the former middleweight champion, and also against Yoel Romero, who is still a middleweight contender. Now, obviously, those fighters are way better, way more complete than a guy like Derek Brunson, but that was on PEDs. He lost those fights on PEDs, so I'm trying to imagine what he's going to look like 2 years off, and also how his body looks and performs post the performance enhancing drugs. Now, he's going up against a guy like Derek Brunson. Derek Brunson is young, he's powerful, good boxing skills, fast hands, and extreme power in his hands. He has a record of 17-5. 10 of his wins come by knockout, so that goes to show you how powerful his punches are. Now, he's 1-2 in his last 2 fights. Now, the fight with Anderson Silva, I do think that he won that fight. I think they just gave it to Anderson Silva. That was the fight, I believe, when they squared off in Brooklyn. Now, he also lost to Robert Whittaker, but Robert Whittaker is the current interim middleweight champion, and he's on his way to becoming the middleweight champion once he gets healthy and once he gets his shot at the title. So Brunson had lost those 2 fights to Silva and to Whittaker, and he bounced back with a knockout win, a vicious knockout win over Daniel Kelly. Now, I understand that Daniel Kelly is 40 years of age. He's nowhere near the same caliber as some of these high-level fighters in that division, but Kelly is tough, man. He's known to have a chin. He's known to be able to absorb punches. So to see Derek Brunson knock him out the way he did, it shows how much power he has. And it's going to be an interesting fight because Machida is very patient. He likes to wait for opportunities to strike. He's a really good counter puncher. But what I'm taking into consideration is he's 39. He's old, and Father Time is undefeated. Sooner or later, you're going to slow down. You're not going to look the same. And I think this is a fight where Derek Brunson's aggression and his pressure is going to make the difference. And I do think that he's going to catch Lyoto Machida early in the first round. And I think he's going to put him away via knockout. Now, if you like these predictions, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content.